I love that new intro video. Welcome to another episode of Countless Corpses podcast. Now, a part of the Omen Comics podcast network. I'm your host, Macabre Michael Nunneley, but our viewers might notice that I have a different co-host with me. Well, his name is David Nemesis Howard. Most of us just call him Nem, though, and that's what I will call him, unless we're playing D&D for Fellowship of the D20, in which case he is Nemesis.
And Master of the world. So
yes. And as a quick side note, he made that intro video we just played there. So hit him up if you want him to make one for you at raincrosspr@gmail.com. But back to the show. Unfortunately, my friend James had to step away because of his day job, and I will miss having him on the show. But Nem agreed to co-host the show with me, and I could not be happier about it. But even with a new awesome co-host, Countless Corpses podcast is still just two longtime horror fans discussing horror in its many forms. Today, we'll be continuing our journey through the Halloween franchise with 1989's Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. But before we get started, Nem, why don't you say hi and give us an opening thoughts you might have.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. So glad to be here. I am excited and pleased to be here on Countless Corpses podcast with Mike and to join Mike as co-host of the show. He came to me and told me that unfortunately James had to step away. And I was like, hey, man, I love horror. Of course I would jump on with you. You know, we're good friends and talking about horror. I'm always down for it, you know, for stuff that I like to watch and stuff that I've never watched before. So, my day job consists of writing horror in prose and comic books, so I am beyond thrilled to be able to step in here and talk about one of my passions, watching horror on film. It's really got me excited, and I can't wait to get into this film, one I wasn't familiar with before I watched it several times for this show. There's a lot to unpack here, and I can't wait to get into it. So once again, thanks to Mike, thanks to all of you, the viewing audience, for welcoming and inviting me to be in here with you and to be part of this. And let's strap in and prepare ourselves for the ride. Let's do it.
Oh, you are more than welcome, my friend. I am thrilled to have you on the show and was super excited when you agreed to do it. I think going over these films with a fellow horror writer like myself will be a lot of fun, and I think it may even offer a unique perspective. So without further ado, let's get into our first episode together. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers came out in 1989, just 1 year after Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. The success of the previous film led to a rush to make Halloween 5 by October of 1989 by Moustapha Akkad. Akkad originally approached Halloween 4 writer Alan B. McElroy and director Dwight H. Little about coming back for Halloween 5, but both of them wanted to step away from the franchise and had other commitments anyway. While Paul Freeman was the producer on Halloween 4, Ramsey Thomas took over for Halloween 5, and it was Ramsey Thomas who hired playwright Shem Bitterman as the first screenwriter. Bitterman busted out the script in just 3 days called Halloween 5, The Killer Inside Me, which seemed to pick up where Halloween 4 left off with an evil Jamie Lloyd and, of course, a resurrected Michael Myers. In this script, the now teenage Jamie goes on a killing spree of her own, and Myers tries to kill her because she's interfering with his killing spree, and Rachel Carruthers gets caught in the middle of it all. However, executive producer Moustapha Akkad, who outranked Ramsey Thomas, didn't like the screenplay and said it felt more like a parody of a Halloween film than an actual entry into the franchise. In Moustapha Akkad's views, the only killer should be Michael Myers. Did you hear that, Blumhouse? Halloween ends. Now, not to mention, Akkad had already promised Danielle Harris that she would return as Jamie Lloyd, and he didn't feel like a 12-year-old would be a credible serial killer. And with as much as I like the idea of that, I can't say Akkad is wrong about that. A 12-year-old does not make a good serial killer or a scary one. I mean, sure, the ending of Halloween 4 is very shocking and reminiscent of Michael Myers killing Judith even. But I don't think you could have a good horror movie with a 12-year-old as the killer unless she's like possessed by a demon or something to make her more powerful. But what do you think about that, Nem?
Well, first off, I just have to say, Halloween 5, The Killer Inside Me was also the subtitle for my my Halloween experience when I was 5 years old. So we'll just put that out there. But anyway, far be it from me to disagree with you and Akkad on this one. But I personally find the idea of a 12-year-old serial killer, if done right, to be incredibly fascinating. To be fair, though, I have to admit that one of the things that scares the hell out of me and that I love to write about as a extension of it scaring the hell out of me is evil children. I mean, evil children scare the bejesus out of me. That and clowns, forget about it. I'm done. No.
Yeah.
But I will concede that the idea of a 12-year-old, any 12-year-old, I don't care who they are, rivaling the killing prowess and sheer physical power of Michael Myers is absurd. It's just absolutely absurd on its face. Michael Myers is a force of nature, and to have him upstaged by a prepubescent girl seems disrespectful in the extreme. Interestingly enough, Bitterman wasn't the only person who thought the movie should have gone the way he envisioned. Many of the cast members on Halloween 5 have spoken out against the film, with Danielle Harris, Ellie Cornell, and Don Shanks admitting they had a hard time on set. Side note on this, while it's not a horror film, I love Danielle Harris in The Last Boy Scout. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. She's absolutely fantastic.
I actually have to second that motion. The Last Boy Scout is awesome, and Harris is good in it as well. But back to Halloween 5, I believe you had a bit more to say about how the crew felt about Jamie being the or a killer, didn't you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, evidently, even Donald Pleasance disagreed with Akkad on this, and follow-up director Dominique Othnin-Girard remarked that they had not capitalized on the shock ending of Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. And I think that's fair to say, even though we may disagree whether or not that's the direction they should have gone. In their view, Jamie should have been characterized as all evil after stabbing her stepmother in Halloween 4. And considering how the characters respond to Jamie's reveal at the end of Halloween 4, wanting to kill her on the spot, it's understandable. I mean, additionally, there's still a good deal of that tension remaining in Halloween 5, most notably with Loomis and other people in the town wanting to rid the world of this devil child. I mean, Danielle Harris was also under the impression that she would return in Halloween 5 as the serial killer. During a panel discussion at Halloween 25 Years of Terror, Danielle Harris remarked that the way Halloween 4 ended, I thought I was going to be the killer. I thought it would have been fun to come back as the killer or Michael's sidekick. Scary, but fun. I'm just going to wrap this up by reiterating that, in my opinion, the idea of a 12-year-old serial killer is a compelling one and one I'd love to explore. But I also agree that this is where the ending of Halloween 4 seemed to be pointing. However, I just don't see it working in a Halloween movie. I just don't, especially one featuring Michael Myers. To have Jamie be the serial killer, I think you need to sideline Michael, and I don't think that's a winning recipe in a Halloween movie, sidelining Michael Myers. Giving Michael Myers a 12-year-old sidekick seems like an even larger stretch. I mean, Bruce Wayne can get away with having a Robin, but I just don't see Michael Myers pointing to the stab signal in the sky so that Jamie could get suited up for murder. I mean, I assume you've talked about Season of the Witch, which didn't have Michael Myers of it, but I think that's a great example of what happens to a Halloween movie when you sideline Michael Myers. You know what I'm saying?
The stab signal is fucking hilarious. I'm picturing like a little thorn rune rippling on the night clouds.
Go get the knife.
That's right. But as for your question, we did not do Season of the Witch. It's so out of place in the franchise, I wasn't planning on covering it. We're also leaving out Rob Zombie's 2 Halloween movies because we covered that on our other OCPN show, Open Revelations podcast. Also, we're leaving out Halloween Resurrections and Halloween Ends, as I loathe those films. And I'd rather talk about films that I like. And bashing on things just really isn't my deal. So that is not to say I will love every film we will cover, but I'd rather not hate the film.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Life's too short to waste on hate. Let's talk about murder that we love, okay? How about that?
That sounds like a plan, my friend. Macabre Michael Nunneley is here to do it. All right, my friend.
To the stab signal. So.
Yes, to the stab signal we go. As to a 12-year-old serial killer, I suppose I would have to see how it was done. I could certainly agree, though, that children can be creepy and terrifying. Examples of that immediately come to mind are like Children of the Corn, twins in The Shining, or Anthony from Twilight Zone, the movie, just to name a few. But I can't think of an example of a slasher with an evil child. So I don't feel like I have any basis of comparison there. I have to admit, though, that I fully thought Jamie was going to be the killer after watching Halloween 4. I mean, I don't see how one could watch Halloween 4 and not think that's where the story is going to pick up in the next film. So it was definitely not properly capitalized on. And quite frankly, the psychic connection they used to build on it instead of making her the killer works, but I can't make any sense of why it happened. Why wasn't a psychic connection created with Laurie Strode if it was a familial connection that was made? We saw Jamie take Michael's hand in Halloween 4, and it does seem like something happened there. In H4, it seems like the curse of Thorn was passed on to Jamie, and that's why she seemingly killed her foster mom. But they backpedal all of that to that psychic connection with no real explainable basis. I mean, let's not forget, Halloween 5 starts out by changing the end of Halloween 4. So continuity was clearly not what they were going for here. Of course, none of that matters because we all know that Akkad disagreed with the entire concept, and he is the trump card for all decisions here.
Yeah, absolutely. With anything in life, it really doesn't matter how good your idea is if the big boss vetoes it. Say la vie.
Right.
It is what it is, unfortunately. That's why you go to work for yourself, because you get tired of getting your ideas vetoed all the time. But I also think you raise another important point here, though, Mike. In 4, they committed to a direction, and then they changed that direction midstream. I mean, who knows if Bitterman's vision would have worked? It's entirely possible. I mean, stranger things have happened. However, once you commit to a storyline, changing midstream is always dangerous. It can be very confusing for your audience. I mean, your comments, my comments, probably most everyone's comments prove that. Everyone's like, what the heck happened here? So to be fair, it's not a failing unique to this film or the genre. Movies are often compromises. It's unusual to see one person's vision dominate a film, let alone a series of films, the Batman films. And I think I could go out on a limb and say that we were robbed of Bitterman's vision by the process of Hollywood movie making and the veto power of Akkad. I'll stand by my comment that you need to establish some supernatural bona fides for Jamie in order for her to stand next to Michael, but I'd be lying if I said that I wouldn't like to watch that. It would be interesting to see how you would bring that about.
Oh no, we are absolutely agreed that if you give Jamie some kind of supernatural powers, like having her possessed by a demon with a lust for blood and death or something, it could be awesome, and I would totally watch a movie like that. But I mean, if I'm being honest, that really isn't Halloween. I will also add the caveat that it can't be the curse of Thorn causing it all if Michael and Jamie were the slasher version of Batman and Robin. The curse of Thorn is by definition given to one family member. So they would have to be creative with how they did that.
All right. I got to ask the question now. Are you like me? You really do want to see the slasher version of Batman and Robin now?
I do kind of want to see that.
Or do we call that Big Daddy and Hit Girl? Is that the slasher version?
Oh, there you go. That could work.
Yeah. But back to the point you're making. I got to agree with you. Absolutely. We writers, we can always pull something out of our nether regions when we're writing. We can figure out a way to make it work, and when I'm talking about nether regions, I'm not talking about Hades, and we'll just leave it at that. But I think Jamie could have been a controller or a conduit of some type, and that might have been fascinating. But I got to agree, like you said, then we're lapsing into supernatural territory, and that's not really Halloween anymore. That's the stuff of Friday the 13th or A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right. I think something like that could work, but I think Jamie would have to be the killer for it to work. I think Halloween Ends showed us that having competing killers in a Halloween film doesn't work. But back to the script. It would seem, though, that Bitterman did have a second draft for the script by February of 1989, and I guess they liked it originally, as they were even talking to director Jeff Burr, who did From a Whisper to a Scream to direct. In fact, Burr's producing partners, Darren Scott and William Burr, were also in the mix to co-produce alongside Ramsey Thomas. So essentially, things were all set as far as Jeff Burr directing. But that was before series co-creator Deborah Hill met director Domenico Thenin-Gerard in 1989 Sundance Film Festival and recommended him to Akkad, and Akkad hired him. Again, stepping over producer Ramsey Thomas. I mean, why even have Thomas there? This is what you're going to do all the time. But After being instated as director, Dominique Othénin-Girard infamously threw Bitterman's draft into the trash can in front of Mustafa Akkad, and Akkad just went with it. Though
Wow.
Bitterman remained credited for contractual reasons. I I have to wonder, though, if Mustafa Akkad had any idea what he was getting into when he hired Othénin-Girard, or if he just trusted Deborah Hill. But it takes some balls to get hired as a director, and the first thing you do is throw away what progress in pre-production has been done in the trash right in front of the guy who just hired you. I have to imagine that was for dramatic effect, but I certainly would not have come on to a movie as a director with the goal of throwing out everything they had hired me to work with to make my own film, especially knowing all that is involved in every little process. But how about you, Nem? Do you have the cojones to pull off an Othénin-Girard?
Let me think about that for a minute. That would be a no. So, yeah, you know how I was talking about Hades and the nether regions, and it's not Hades? That is when you are acting like those nether regions right there. So, you know, but like I said before, this happens in Hollywood a lot. It's power politics, and everyone wants to put their stamp on something in order to advance their career. You know, they don't want to share the limelight. They want to advance themselves, advance their brand, advance their name. If that means you got to throw someone else's blood, sweat, and tears in the trash, then vaya con Dios, or vaya con diablos, as it were. You know, but yeah, I could never do something like that. It's just not who I am. It seems disrespectful, and it's bound to cause hard feelings and drama. And at some point later down the road of life, it's going to come back to bite you in those nether regions again. You know, it just is. It's my opinion anyway.
No, definitely. It is very disrespectful. And actually, Vaya con Diablos is badass.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to work that into a story. Maybe even with a nice Samuel L. Jackson motherfucker right at the end of it.
I have to say, Vaya con Diablos is a movie line reference to Demon Knight, the Tales from the Crypt. It's a Billy Zane line. So, yeah.
Nice. I didn't catch that. Very nice. I like that. But seriously, it sounds like we're in agreement on what Othénin-Girard did there. I can't say that is a move that will get you rehired, honestly. You don't come onto a project saying that it sucks and you're going to fix it and expect that not to get around. I would be less inclined to hire someone who I felt had no respect for what came before and what the creators were wanting them to do. Not only is it insulting to them creatively, it makes you difficult to work with, and quite frankly, films are difficult enough all on their own. But back to the script. Othénin-Girard brought in Robert Harders, who was one of the writers in 1979's Home Movies, to write an entirely new draft, which he did, and it went in a whole new direction. And boy, do I mean a whole new direction. They strayed pretty far from Halloween's roots. In Harders' script, which was heavily inspired by the Frankenstein mythos, at least according to Harders, the story would pick up directly after the events of Halloween 4. Robert Harders said in a 2017 interview with Dread Central, "I proposed opening the story with a tremendous storm, thunder, fierce lightning, the shattering timbers, concrete, wires, and rebar entangling and supporting the lifeless body of Michael Myers and channeling the storm's life-giving electrical current from the heavens into the body of our creature and bringing him back to life." Now, if he wants to say that was inspired by Frankenstein, okay, I can see that to some degree. However, I would like to point out that in Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, which came out 3 years before that in 1986, Jason too is raised from the dead because Tommy Jarvis stuck a metal fence post in him and it too was struck by lightning, and that was inspired by Frankenstein. You'll note the rebar in Michael and the lightning bringing him back to life, and it's very reminiscent of Jason Lives. I suppose both could have been inspired by the same source material, but I find it odd that Friday the 13th did it first. Do you have any thoughts on that one, Neb? Was he in fact inspired by Frankenstein or copying Friday the 13th, who was in fact inspired by Frankenstein?
Slander. You're slandering the man. Now, what's that old saying? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Well, the flip side of that saying is that imitation is one step away from plagiarism and a lawsuit. So I think if you're Harders, you have to say that you're paying homage to Shelley's Frankenstein, and you certainly can't say that you're copying a concept utilized by the rival Friday the 13th franchise, because then there's that lawsuit coming in. So, however, the lightning quickening made famous by Frankenstein is iconic. So I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, even though I really don't believe them, to be perfectly honest with you. But if you allow me a comment, though, I would note that whole trope to me is very lazy and overdone, and I think it works in Jason Lives, but I much prefer when writers stretch their imagination and try to find new ways to tackle a problem. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, do you like it when you overuse stuff like that, or do you want them to do different stuff?
I think I would have to agree with that. Finding something new can be difficult, but there are ways to combine multiple elements into a new inspiration, like Eastman and Laird did with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Combining the mutant trend with Daredevil and all that kind of thing. Plus, I think you make a good point about Harder's not being able to say that Jason Lives was an inspiration, even if it was. And I suppose I can accept that it is at least possible that Shelley was in fact his inspiration. But given how much both franchises feed off one another, as I've talked about for a few episodes now, I just doubt it. But I cannot deny the iconic status of that scene from Frankenstein. So I suppose I'm willing to give him the benefit of the very large doubt.
How large is it?
About this big. So, either way, Robert Harder's pitch was rejected. As a result, the screenplay was rewritten essentially from scratch by Michael Jacobs and director Dominique Othen-Girard. The duo's initial title was Halloween 5 and Things That Go Bump in the Night. Oh. The screenplay by Michael Jacobs introduced a storied subplot in which Myers, under the influence of a cult centered around an ancient rune of Thorn, is driven to kill his bloodline. While the final cut of the film features a mysterious man in black character, the Curse of Thorn subplot was largely minimized, resulting in audiences and critics being confused about it until it was expanded on in Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers from 1995. As a quick side note, in terms of his appearance, the Man in Black's wardrobe of a long black trench coat and black cowboy boots is a nod to country singer Johnny motherfucking Cash, who often wore long black coats and black cowboy boots, thus earning him the famous nickname, the Man in Black. Hell, Johnny Cash even wrote a song called The Man in Black. As a big Johnny Cash fan, I just really love that. The problem with his character, though, is that there is no real explanation of who he is. There was one theory, according to Don Shanks, the guy who played Michael Myers, that the Man in Black was going to be Michael Myers' brother. But truth be told, not even Mustafa Akkad had any idea when they made Halloween 5. After reviewing the screenplay, director Othen-Girard added Jamie's inability to speak to the draft, along with the supernatural subplot device of her telepathic visions connected to Michael. The script added two bumbling cops, deputies Nick and Tom, who not only acted like lousy cops, they flat out say they're like lousy cops. To accentuate the ridiculousness, director Othen-Girard lays it on thick with the clown-themed bells and whistles in the background during their introduction. As annoying as this is, it is intended to be commentary on the annoying nature of the two bumbling cops in Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left from 1972, as well as an homage to it. But I believe you had something to say about Othen-Girard really departing from the source material, didn't you, Nim?
Yeah, how do I put this nicely? Every creative likes to flex their creative muscles, and Girard was no exception on this film. However, they departed from previous films of the series by attempting to persuade the audience to relate to Michael Myers. He wanted Michael to appear, and I quote, more human, even vulnerable, with contradicting feelings inside of them. He illustrated those feelings with a scene in the movie where Michael removes his mask and sheds a tear. And Girard explained this by saying that this is done, again, to humanize him, to give him a tear. If evil, or in this, our boogeyman knows pain or love or demonstrates a feeling of regret. My goodness, even his quote sounds like he doesn't know what he's talking about. He becomes even more scary to me, Girard went on to say, if he pursues his malefic actions. He shows an evil determination beyond his feelings. Dr. Loomis tries to reach his emotional side several times in Halloween 5. He thinks he could cure Michael through his feelings. I'm going to call some serious bullshit on this one. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll expand on my bullshit comment a little bit. I have to say, and I'm really curious, what you all think out there as well, but I think this is a complete misreading of Michael Myers as a character and most serial killers in real life. I mean, when you read the interviews and biographies of various serial killers, you will find that their particular brand of psychopathy is not one devoid of emotion. Rather, almost to a T, they have an inability of empathizing with human beings and seeing them as worthy of emotion. Many serial killers could see a human being as an object worthy of murder, but weep uncontrollably at the slaughter of a dog, for instance. If you truly wanted to play up the unique emotional makeup of Michael Myers, this was the direction you needed to take. I'm not saying this was the route to go. In fact, I'm really not saying that, because Michael Myers should be an iconic, just silent figure of death, in my opinion.
Right.
But if this is what you want to do, this was one way to possibly tackle it. And I think as a writer, this is why you have to be incredibly familiar with every aspect of your character and the details surrounding them. And it's just so important as a writer to do that. What do you think?
I think you make a great point there. And a point that is actually brought up in Rob Zombie's Halloween reboot in 2007, where Michael is rewritten into a more stereotypical serial killer. And it allows the audience to relate more with Michael Myers, which is cool for some Halloween fans and an abomination to others. But I fully agree with you on the fact that that's really the best way to go if you want to humanize Michael. But now that we have the writing stuff out of the way, let's get into one of my favorite parts of the show, and that is talking about the mask.
What, you like masks? Look at you.
No, not at all. So, as is the case with the mass slashers and big franchises, the look of a killer tends to change from film to film. And this is a little bit like what you were talking about earlier with different creators coming onto a project. This is in large part because each new person that comes onto the franchise wants to leave their mark on it, But in this particular case, that was actually not why the Michael Myers mask looks different. The original idea was just to reuse the hero mask from Halloween 4. But here's the problem. George P. Wilbur, who played Michael Myers in Halloween 4, was not reprising his role and was replaced by stuntman Don Shanks with a bigger head, longer face, and thicker neck. So when Shanks tried on the H4 hero mask, it did not fit him quite right. Consequently, a new one had to be designed. But guess who designed it? The special effects wizard who learned his trade under none other than the legendary splatter guru Tom Savini. And of course, I'm talking about the almighty Greg Nicotero, who you might know from The Walking Dead, Sin City, and The Land of the Dead. Well, him and K&B EFX group. Awesome. The new mask would feature a far different look than previous one, despite being presented in the story as the same mask seen in Halloween 4. The mask features a ghastlier look and a more defined expression with a far wider neck and an elongated face. Two of the more noticeable features on the mask were the long, pulled-back hair and teardrop-shaped eyes. The shape of the lips and eyebrows also gave the mask an angrier look instead of the blank expression of his predecessors. The mask also had a slightly thicker rubber than the others, which is evident in its appearance. Contrary to the previous mask, which was always tucked in, the neck of this mask just hangs over Michael's collar. Don Shanks said that the mask was held together by Velcro and had no ventilation, which made it extremely tough to breathe in. But even in Halloween 5, we still end up with two mask versions, at least in a modified way. Don Shanks received a fractured septum from what looked like a 2x4 to me, swung by actor Donald Pleasance during the beatdown in the third act at the Myers home. Seems like Pleasance got a little overzealous there.
Yeah, he went full hacksaw Jim Duggan on him, man.
He did, no doubt about it. But either way, because of this, a paper-thin nose cut off of another H5 had to be grafted onto the mask in order to accommodate for Shanks' bandaged nose. And considering Shanks' size, I bet you'd Pleasance was really sorry. The edges of the nose appliance can actually be seen clearly in some portions of the film. Don Shanks had to keep the mask off, actually, unless he was actually ready to play Michael Myers for a couple of reasons. The first being, when you put on the mask as an actor, you become Michael Myers. And apparently, there were even complaints around the neighborhood. They were shooting in because kids were seeing him walk down the street with the mask on and got scared.
Understandable.
Just to get an idea, Shanks was huge. The dude is buff. He was so buff. In fact, check this little story out. When the film was over, he just walked with the mask for Michael Myers. They tried to take it from him. He said, "Nope, game ball. I'm walking with it," and nobody took it from him.
That's awesome.
And last but not least, it should be noted, like Halloween 4's mask, the H5 mask was heavily criticized as well for its eyebrows and the teardrop-shaped eyes. The scary thing about the original mask was the blankness of it, like you pointed out earlier. But I believe you had some stuff to share about Michael Myers and Halloween 5 too, didn't you, Nem?
Absolutely. And I do have to say, I was always one who thought that the blank expression is what's really truly scaring about it, because he's emotionless as a serial killer. But back to, a little bit more on the effects and who did it and everything. So K&B Effects, which you mentioned already, they've also done work on Scream, The Glorious Bastards, The X-Files, many others. They were asked to design some grotesque facial makeup for the unmasking of Michael Myers towards the end of the film. Now, that's really interesting there, So they were asked to do all this, and they did the work. And the producers were not sure what direction they wanted to go. And so it asked K&B to come up with this look in case they chose to showcase Michael's badly scarred face at the end of the film. And isn't this always the way? The producers aren't sure what they want to do, and they're going to ask you to do something just in case. You're going to put all this work in, and then it's not going to get used, So, and sure enough, instead, the producers decided to keep Michael's face in the dark. However, and I'm just going to throw this out there again, I think this is probably the better choice for the film for any number of reasons. It would have been interesting to get a glimpse of him, Vader Empire Strikes Back style. But I prefer my Michael Myers to be a Haddonfield man of mystery, as it were, So
No, I totally agree with that. And actually, I think I mentioned this in episode 1, but when Michael Myers was unmasked in the 78 film, Tony Moran played him, and despite just looking like a normal guy, when audiences saw his face for that brief moment in the first movie, many of them swore that Michael Myers looked like a monster, that he had this hideous face. So that goes to show you the power of the theater of the mind and how it can affect even our memories of a movie. Psycho's infamous shower scene is another classic example of people's memories of a scene changing based on what they imagined in their minds, as many people swear they saw Mother's knife pierce Marion's flesh, but it never happened on camera. But that said, I think you're right about keeping Michael's face in shadow. They're doing a lot to take away the shape's mystery by this point, and holding on to something mysterious about the character is a necessity. But they actually blew that in what reveals they did show of Michael without the mask, didn't they, Ned?
Yeah, I really do have to agree with you on that one, Mike. I think they made a decision here, and they didn't execute particularly well on that decision. Maybe we're having a different discussion if their direction that they had decided to go with actually blew our socks off. But that doesn't seem to be the case, because, my socks were blown off. Do you still have your socks on, Mike? Because my socks are still firmly on. So
I think mine were pulled up to the knees even.
But I will also note that this is the first Halloween movie to feature a raven-haired Michael Myers. Originally, he's a blonde. And I don't think this is a non-starter for me, but I do love continuity, and I wish they had done something to keep the hair color consistent with previous appearance. And I know that a lot of fans of the franchise absolutely notice. I think that this is kind of a nitpicky thing as a writer. As a writer, I could just as easily say that the pervading evil of Michael Myers has now infected his hair and changed his color. See, I'm pulling stuff out of the nether regions again. So, but problem solved, my nether regions have birthed something else for the horror scene. But I'm getting back into writing again, hold habit, But back to that hair. You can see Michael without his mask twice. That's the hair on Michael Myers, not in my nether regions. Don't worry, folks. We're not going there. So, yeah, this is a horror show, but you don't need that kind of horror. So, you know. Yeah, but you can see Michael twice in this movie without his mask. The first time is when he wakes up in the cabin at the beginning of the film. And the second is in the attic of the home where he is in front of Jamie. That's the part where he also has the tear, and, you know, we're supposed to empathize with Michael, and violins are playing, and, you know, and roses are coming down. And anyway, I digress. But it's worth noting that there are actually two actors who have played Myers with a different hair color, though. The first is Tom Morgan, and the second is Brad Laurie in the 2002 film Halloween Resurrection. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting. But I don't know. You know, it is what it is. What do you think about, you know, writers pulling stuff out of their nether regions, and me talking about writing and this whole change of hair color and everything, Mike? What do you think about all that?
Actually, bringing up writing is not a problem at all, my friend. With us both being horror writers, this is bound to come up a lot, and I'm hoping that it might provide our listeners with a unique perspective. So I say bring it. But
okay.
as to it being nitpicky, to point that out, I will tell you that to avid Halloween fans, that is not nitpicky at all, but rather a very big deal. Michael Myers is blonde. To show Michael Myers with dark hair is a Halloween faux pas, and what's more, I absolutely love that you had a problem with it, even if we disagree on whether it's a big deal or not. But let's move on to the next segment of pre-production, man.
All right. Pre-production. This is where we are getting ready to get the movie out there. You know, this is an important step. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about the world of previs, location scouts, creative planning, and all the rest. You know, so let's start with a little discussion about location scouting for this film. And I know Mike has some comments on this he wants to make. So I'm going to throw out a few facts, and then we're going to let Mike spit some flame here. So, you know, because he's got some stuff to say. But I will say the house that Michael Myers returns to in this film is not the same house or even the same kind of design, the same architecture as the house in the first Halloween movie. Look up what we were just talking about. Continuity, folks. It matters, and people will notice, especially if you're a fan. You know, shooting for this film was done in Salt Lake City, and there were no small Victorian homes to use as a location in the city to film in. So instead, the filmmakers chose a bigger house, more resembling a mansion than the cozy small home from the original film. So evidently, this family suddenly made it rich and their house transformed due to the evil that turned Mike's hair black and all the other stuff. But, you know, the filmmakers insist that this was always the plan because they needed a larger home that could provide more space, blah, 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 to accommodate the climax and lengthy chase scenes. I'm sorry, but I think I need to call some serious shenanigans on this one. I really do. I mean, even if this is the case that you need all this more, you know, more space and things, there's these things called sound stages where one could construct a set in order to facilitate this kind of filming. I know this is fascinating stuff that I'm opening up to you about Hollywood filmmaking, guys. Or I might be crazy. Who knows? But anyway, enough about my insanity, because I know that you have comments on this, Mike. So let's get to what you have to say. I know you love all of this just as much as you love Tina Williams, but that's later on. So.
You're opening a can of worms there, but we will get to that later. I do, Ned, but let me start by saying you are not crazy at all. They built a duplicate of Ben Meeker's roof on the soundstage for Halloween 4, and a million other movies have done similar things. So I call bullshit on that as well. But as for the Myers house, I have to say that the house is an issue for me. They chose Salt Lake City knowing that it did not have a house like the Myers house. I mean, they had to have looked for that first, right? Even if I'm wrong, the houses are not even remotely the same. And just saying, by the way, you know that the house you've been looking at for multiple films now, it looks like this now. That's not okay. Not to mention, the house was not even on the street that even looked a little bit like Lampkin Lane. Like, it was the wrong house in the wrong neighborhood. This house is a big part of why I didn't like this film the first few times I watched it. But my understanding is that you have a couple of neat bits of trivia, don't you, Nim?
Yeah, I got to throw some trivia out here for all of you about the house. So all of you don't go to Salt Lake City and go firebomb the poor house. It's not the house's fault. So we're going to be handing out a little bit of evil Trivial Pursuit pieces to all of you who know these little tidbits. So get your little, Trivial Pursuit, your evil Trivial Pursuit thing that has like Jason's face on it and everything. So you can put your pieces in there. So here's some trivia. If you know this, reward yourself, go buy the evil trivia slice. So let's see what we got here. So a fun bit of trivia about this location. Stephen King's The Stand from 1994 also used the same location in Salt Lake City, Utah, as the Carruthers house for the scene where Mother Abigail in The Stand first meets everyone in Boulder, Colorado. But the house used in The Stand 1994 was located next door to the Carruthers house. So with that said, I have to ask, Mike, did you just win an evil trivial piece on that? Did you know that?
I did not, and I will put that little evil pie piece right into my little pie holder. Oh. All right, that is actually pretty cool. It does add a little something cool about it that I like. But you have more trivia for us, do you not?
Absolutely, and you can't fill up on pieces of evil pie. I will say that as well. So all the evil pie you can get, you're good. So besides the Myers home, several other prior filming locations from Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, are featured in this film. So those include the Carruthers residence, like we were talking about before, the general store, and that is actually going to be part of why one of the characters gets killed later, that general store. So we're going to talk about that. At the end of the film, the Manic Black exits the bus in front of that store where Jamie and Rachel purchased Halloween costumes in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. So those are some cool little tidbits as well.
Yeah, there's at least a little bit of continuity going on in there.
Yeah, they're trying. They just, the big piece of continuity with the house, they just said F that, though, so... but once again, if you're going to throw somebody's script in the trash, you've got the balls to say F the house too. So, you can do whatever you want.
I guess so.
So let's get into casting. What do you think?
I say that's a good idea. Let's do it.
All right. So enough about those locations. We decided we're not going to firebomb the house. So let's get to the people who bring the movie to life on screen for us. And I'm talking, of course, as I just mentioned, about the cast. There are a number of returning cast members in this film. They include the great Donald Pleasance as Dr. Sam Loomis, Bo Starr as Sheriff Ben Meeker, and, of course, Danielle Harris as Jamie Lloyd. Fantastic actress. So what's eerily funny is that Danielle Harris might be the only person who can claim to have grown up in the fictional town of Haddonfield, Illinois. God help her. Everyone else died on screen, too. So Danielle celebrated her 11th birthday on the set of Halloween 4 and her 12th birthday on the set of Halloween 5.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty crazy, Wow. So
I guess you can really see why she goes by Halloween Girl on Twitter.
Absolutely. I mean, plus she's just such an interesting person now, and then that she grew up on those films it's pretty cool. So, but adding to that unique period in her life, Danielle Harris and Don Shanks actually became very good friends over the course of the filming, reportedly spending a lot of time together off set while accompanied by Danielle's mom. So don't worry about that. Don was, just being a nice guy and everything. Nothing creepy there or anything. Right. Danielle Harris also became good friends with Ellie Cornell on the set of Halloween 4. And so cool little story. Well, there's some good parts in it and some bad parts in it, but I'll tell the story and I'm curious what you're going to say about this, Mike. Okay. Marquee star Donald Pleasance had another commitment immediately following Halloween 5. So his scenes were shot in the first 2 weeks of shooting. And this is an uncommon and one of the many challenges a director and producer will face when planning a shooting schedule. So after filming for 2 weeks, Donald Pleasance gave his much bigger trailer to Danielle Harris before he left. That's cool. That's the great part of the story. However, the reason he did it is because Harris's mother had been complaining about the small size of her trailer during shooting the whole time and was presumably appeased when Pleasance gifted his trailer to Danielle when she left. Look, Mom, we get that you needed some place to lounge around while your daughter was working and being your, meal ticket, but give it a rest, all right? Seriously. It's always nice to hear heartwarming stories like this, and I'm sure it helped Danielle feel more comfortable to be accepted and befriended on set. Doubly so, considering she was much younger than the majority of the cast. But the whole thing with the mom, oh man, forget about it. What do you think about that whole thing, though, Mike?
Harris's mother may be Fran, but she sounds like a total fucking Karen. That 12-year-old Danielle Harris wasn't complaining about the size of her room. I think you nailed it there. That was all Karen. I mean Fran. Using her daughter's clout to make her life better. What I'll bet she didn't consider was the effect of her being a package deal with Danielle Harris and being difficult to work with might mean less work for Danielle. But that little rant aside, why don't we talk about the rest of the cast?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get away from Super Karen there. I mean, Fran. So moving on from the great Danielle Harris and Halloween Karen, as she will now be known from here on out, we have a much better Karen in the cast, Karen Alston. Karen Alston returned to reprise her role as Darlene Carruthers, Jamie's stepmother. But she's only here for one scene. Her one scene was in the beginning of the film, a flashback to Halloween 4, where she was murdered by Jamie as she falls backward into the bath. And as we've talked about previously, it was a strange choice given that Jamie would not take on the full serial killer role originally envisioned, and they invariably had stock footage from the previous movie in the first place. So they brought her back to refilm this, and they already had stock footage. It was very strange. Ellie Cornell also came back to reprise her role as Rachel Carruthers, Jamie's stepsister from Halloween 4. Reportedly, Cornell had an issue with her death scene in the movie and thought it was over the top. In fact, Ellie almost backed out of the film after learning that her character would die in the first act by having scissors shoved down her throat. There were a series of negotiations, and ultimately the actress agreed to do a softer version for the scene in return for more money. Rachel's rewritten death scene ultimately reflected the death of her mother at the hands of Jamie in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. However, I'm going to say this. In my opinion, Ellie was probably surprised to find out that she was being brought back for the next installment of the franchise, only to be killed off very early in the film. And seeing the writing on the wall and knowing that her time in the franchise was done, I'm sure she was determined to get as much money as possible, seeing that her time in the franchise was done. So what do you think about that, Mike?
I honestly can't see her position at all. I mean, I just don't get it. What difference did it make to her if she was stabbed in the throat instead of in the chest? I mean, do we really have an actress trying to call the shots on what is and isn't too gruesome in a Halloween movie? And while I like the subtle nod to Halloween 4 as it continues the narrative of the psychic connection between Michael and Jamie, which I will get into later, I call bullshit on her claims that her death was too gruesome. I don't think that was her issue at all. I think, like you mentioned, she was just trying to get a bigger payday. You'll notice that all of her supposed artistic integrity went right out the window when they agreed to pay her more.
Ooh,
Plus, yep. Plus, I have personally heard Ellie Cornell say that she was amazed that she survived in Halloween 4 at all, and knew right off the bat that she was going to die in Halloween 5. It was just expected. I can, however, agree that Rachel's death did not quite do her character justice. It was anticlimactic after part 4. I think there should have at least been a struggle of some sort, at least a brief battle. My understanding is that Cornell is generally unhappy with her appearance in Halloween 5, not only because of her death, but also because she dislikes the perm she had in the film and feels that it was strange and unnecessary for her to be wearing only a bath towel for most of her screen time.
I have to interject real quickly.
Okay.
I got to agree with that. It was strange. So it really was kind of weird. So the perm and the bath towel, but I digress.
No, I'm with you there. Mustafa Akkad later said that he actually regretted killing off Rachel. And looking back on it, he would have kept her alive. In his words, at the time, she was intended as a sacrificial lion to show that anyone can die. But what happened is Jamie's protector died very offhandedly and was replaced by Tina fucking Williams, who was definitely a step down. But you had some things to share about Kaplan, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we're getting into your favorite part of the show now. We're going to spend the next 25 minutes on Tina Williams. So anyway, no, folks, we really aren't. Yeah, Tina Williams was played by Wendy Kaplan in the film, and interestingly, Lori Petty was also in the running for this role. As an aside, I have to say I love Lori Petty, and I am fucking glad she didn't get this part because I hate that character so much. And if Lori Petty had been that character, I would be a very conflicted man today. So anyway, during the Halloween party, Tina was supposed to wear a devil costume, and they gave it to the character of Sammy instead. Evidently, the director, this guy, was making all sorts of great choices. He didn't want the heroine to look like a devil. Given the forgettable nature of Tina, they should probably have made her the devil. It would have given us something to root for anyway. The devil we didn't want to know, fighting the serial killer for his emotions, you know? God almighty. Whew. Othan and Gerard, what were you doing, man? You were on crack or something. But anyway, I digress. Tamara Glenn also appeared in this film as Samantha Sammy Thomas. Tamara would star in a few horror-related projects in the late 80s, and she was brought on to Halloween 5 as the friend who gets killed after she violates the sexuality taboo. You know the rules. I mean, we all know the rules, right? For whatever reason, it appears that Tamara was not prepared for the role or what that role would entail, though. On the DVD audio commentary, director Dominique Othan-Girard stated that Miss Glenn became increasingly tense and unfeminine as they got closer to filming her love scene / death scene. Glenn even asked Danielle Harris to be on set during the filming of the scene in order to ease the tension. Now, that really seems odd to me. You're going to be filming a love scene and you're going to invite a 13-year-old onto the set to help ease the tension. What the hell is going on there, man? Anyway, I digress. What do you think about these characters and Tina Williams and everybody else, Mike?
No, I gotta that was weird to bring her on at that age to ease the tension. But I mean, it wasn't actually the first time that there was all kinds of tension about doing sex scenes or nudity in a film. You should check out the Halloween 2 episode.
Okay.
That was quite a fiasco there. But I actually rank Tina Williams as the second most annoying character I have ever seen in a horror movie, right after Franklin from 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Wow.
But that is just me. You know, in the audio commentary on the DVD, it is stated that Greg Nicotero and Wendy Foxworth were actually dating during the filming. So I have to imagine that all of her annoying characteristics were just an act. Otherwise, who would date her? But seriously, do you find Tina Williams as annoying as I do?
Well, how do I put this nicely? I don't think I can put it nicely, so I'll just say it. I think Tina is secretly a commercial spot against drugs because she acts manic for most of the films. I mean, I can't decide if it's bad acting, bad writing, or all of the above. Whatever it is, her emotes are always at like 11. I mean, it's freaking annoying as hell. And she reminds me of that infamous close talker from Seinfeld packed into an annoying teenage stereotype. I mean, that is a horror movie in and of itself. So to answer your question, I've got to friggin' agree with you like 5,000%. Like, we're talking Tina Williams level agreement here, you know? So...
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, sweet vindication.
Yeah.
Besides the Myers house issue I had with the movie, Tina Williams was a big part of why I had to force myself through this movie the first time I watched it. I honestly cheered when Michael Myers killed her. But speaking of Michael, let's talk about the casting of Michael Myers in Halloween 5. George P. Wilbur had not expressed interest in returning to the role of the Shape, although he did work as a stunt player on the film. As I mentioned earlier when I was talking about The Mask, 39-year-old Don Shanks was then cast to play Michael, and it so happens that Don Shanks is the only person of Native American ancestry to ever take on the role. I thought that was kind of cool.
That is really cool.
Shanks also played the Man in Black. Shanks is 6'1" and had already played similar characters to Michael Myers in the first 2 Silent Night, Deadly Night movies. If you don't know if you haven't watched those movies, go out and watch them. They are awesome. However, camera angles were used to make him appear taller and more imposing, despite his just being an enormous hulk of a man anyway.
Wow. that is really cool. I didn't know that about the camera angles and the whole Native American thing. is awesome. I love to hear stuff like that. That is some really cool bit of movie making trivia right there. So I love it. Evil pie pieces all around for everybody for that. So
I love the evil pie pieces. That is awesome.
Oh man, yeah. We're gonna be enjoying evil pie with the side of macabre sour cream, or not sour, whipped cream later. So we'll be doing all that. So
Oh yeah, and we have not had our share of evil pie yet. So let's get into production. Principal photography began May 1st, 1989 in Salt Lake City, Utah, as well as the surrounding communities of Provo and Ogden. Production was rushed through quickly by Mustafa Akkad for the film to be released for Halloween the year after Halloween 4. As a result, shooting started without a completed script, and numerous rewrites, cuts, and changes were made on the fly during production. Filming completed on June 11th, 1989, taking 42 days. Akkad also regretted rushing the film into production so soon after Halloween 4, as it not only hurt the overall quality of Halloween 5, it also resulted in a very underwhelming box office, because H5 ended up competing with the home video release of Halloween 4. That was a nightmare all on its own. But what is not considered until afterwards was that that excitement for another sequel didn't have enough time to build back up in such a short period of time. So, Nem, you've been digging into movies for a while now on Cinema Crusaders. And as a side note, we are definitely going to have to figure out how our two shows can do an episode later. Maybe during horror month or something.
Absolutely.
Anyway, my question is, I have not come across a situation where movie franchises competing with itself like this before. I mean, what a disaster. But have you come across something like that before, where a movie's actually kind of competing with itself?
Well, I've seen films do something similar before, where you shoot many films in sequence or something like that. Most notably, they did that with Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings films, where they did everything in sequence and all the films were marketed together. But the difference there was, excuse my language on this, the people behind Halloween 4 and Halloween 5 went in half-cocked. They really did. You need to have everything planned out and the writing settled in order to pull off something like this. And just, I was shaking my head in frustration just hearing you saying that writing wasn't finished and they were already shooting scenes. That's always a bad look. That's not good. So not only that, when you do something like this, where you're filming movies back to back for continuity's sake, it's not something you do on a whim. You're doing it because you want to get all the actors in. You want to keep them looking the same so that you don't have differences. There's a whole host of reasons you do it. But whenever you do something like this, you have to have the advertising and release divisions of your company provide synergy. They have to work together. You can't be competing against yourself. Otherwise, you're going to have a failure like what happened here. So there are a lot of moving parts, and it sounds like they never anticipated the problems that could arise and the potential windfall they might have had on their hands if they had executed it correctly.
No, I don't think they did. What's ironic is that the rush to make Halloween 5 was based on wanting to make money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you're right on the nose there. There was a real lack of synergy between the departments and no consideration of all the things each department needed to do in the process. So, we can't talk about the production process without talking about stuntman Don Shanks' experience playing Michael Myers. Don Shanks did all of his own stunts for Halloween 5. That stream you see him floating through was 34 degrees. Granted, it was in the middle of summer, so, I mean, it's not quite as bad as it seemed, but summer heat or not, I don't know how many times they did that in that water, but it could get real cold real quick. And that can cause tight muscles and cramps, but hopefully it wasn't too many takes. That's all I can say. If you remind me to tell you actually about having to do scenes in the freezing water when we get to our Friday the 13th discussion.
I'm sure.
But for now, let's talk about some of Shanks' other stunts. Shanks was actually injured from filming the scene where Shape crashes Mike's Camaro into the tree at 15 miles an hour. Dominique Othen and Gerard just straight up forgot to yell cut, and fire was beginning to emerge from the car.
Wow.
Shanks, who was not wearing flame retardant clothing, claims that he was told not to leave the car until the director said cut, and he decided to stay in the vehicle for about a minute because the director had not done so. Shanks puts this down to Dominique Othenay-Girard being sidetracked by seeing the stunts take place for the first time doing a major directing job. Finally, stunt coordinator Don Pike told Dominique Othenay-Girard to call cut, and he did so just in time for Shanks to leave the wreckage.
That is just unbelievable. I mean, there's so much to break down there, but we keep bringing up the name Dominique Othenay-Girard, and I think there's a reason that maybe he was part of the problem here.
I think so.
But back to Don Shanks and his stunts and everything. I wanted to go back to that water scene for a moment, if I can. Okay. If you look closely in that water scene, you could clearly see the flotation device under the overalls that Michael is wearing. In addition, you could see Shanks taking extra care to raise his head as he's floating down the river, and go down the rapids feet first. And it really drove home a couple of points for me. First, we were still back in the days when even Hollywood feature films were operating on shoestring and paperclip innovations at the time and budgets. These days they would make several custom set of overalls with flotation device integrated right into the wardrobe. But here it was just like, here, we're going to put this on you. We're going to kind of finagle it so that you have this, bulky overalls over it, and we're going to make the best of it, So that scene was also incredibly dangerous, I have to say as well. Even the most innocuous looking stunts always have an element of danger, and being in cold water, going down rapids, and kudos to Shanks, who did this in a mask, which we've already talked about, limited his vision. It was difficult to breathe in. I mean, think about that. He's in freezing cold water going down rapids in a mask that he can't breathe in and he can't see very well. Man,
yeah,
I gotta applaud you. That is a commitment to movie making right there. So
yeah. I gotta agree. That's impressive. And actually, that's a nice catch with the flotation device thing. I have never noticed that before, but I'm gonna be looking for it now. But I believe you had a bit more to add about the mask, right?
Yeah, this is another one of those cool tidbits you find when you dig behind the scenes of a movie, and this is the kind of stuff that as fans we love to do. So the scene where Michael drives a car while wearing a different kind of mask was originally scripted to have Michael wearing a Ronald Reagan mask. And do you remember those masks from back in the 80s and in the 90s and stuff, the Reagan masks and stuff? So, and they were incredibly popular at the time. And if you remember the movie Point Break, the robbers would wear Reagan, LBJ, and Nixon masks, which was kind of cool. The presidents were ripping us off like they always do. But either way, this idea was rejected during pre-production as the producers wanted to avoid any political fallout. And the Reagan mask idea had actually been floated around and rejected for Halloween 4 as well. And personally, I don't think it would have been that big a deal, but it really shows a different era of movie making at the time when this movie was filmed. In today's world, I wouldn't be surprised if they revealed that Michael was secretly Reagan's love child or something.
That is hilarious. But I believe you had something to say about the laundry chute scene, Nem.
Yeah, I do. But at first I have to ask, who the hell has a laundry chute in their house? I mean, I guess that they got the laundry chute when their house suddenly morphed into a mansion from being a tiny house, So
that's when it happened for sure.
It was an evil laundry chute, So, but yeah, what kind of bougie house is this with the laundry chute? God, man, in my house, we were lucky to have a laundry basket, let alone a whole chute, So, but enough about my hangups. The laundry chute scene was filmed using 30 different sections of laundry chute. Some were props created for filming, while others were positioned horizontally to run the camera through on a dolly, and it's like they created a sound stage or a set to do it. That's very strange. Anyway, finally, some of the sections were actual laundry chute sections with portions cut out for filming. And like I said, why couldn't they have been this filmed on a sound stage? But I digress. Anyway, we got into that before. So this scene was very complex, and the filming was done in a single night. I
just have to comment on that. 30 different sections of the laundry chute. Imagine all the different. I mean, I've got to wonder how many cameras they used and all that to get all those angles. And you watch it, how they must have cut all that together with that's just a crazy shot right there, just for that shot.
I think that's a great point. I also would love, I don't know if it's available anywhere. I'd love to see the storyboarding, because if they designed all this and built all these sets, these portions, they had to have storyboarded it out. So it must be very, intense and very in depth. That'd be really cool to see. But there is one scene during the laundry chute sequence where Michael is stabbing at the laundry chute over and over again, trying to get at Jamie. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah,
I'm sure you do. Yeah. And he's stabbing over and over again, trying to get at Jamie. And Michael manages to tag her in the leg. And to capture that injury, they actually positioned a prop leg in the chute and then let the gore fly, the kind of stuff that we love.
Yeah.
But I guess the moment was pretty bloody, and it was ultimately cut from the film. Can you believe that? I guess the Motion Picture Association was threatening to give the film an X rating for graphic depictions of violence. And this scene in particular was on their list. And I can imagine that the MPAA were none too fond to see this level of violence visited upon such a young girl. I'm sure that was part of it. But whatever the reason, the movie was toned down to avoid the X rating. In hindsight, that rating would probably have been a hell of an advertising gimmick. It worked a few years later for another horror movie, Showgirls. But I'll point out that if you watch closely, evidence of her injury did survive the editing process. As Jamie is climbing out of the laundry chute, her leg is bleeding heavily as a result of the cut scene, pun intended. So there's no explanation in the theatrical cut of the film of why she's cut and why she's bleeding so badly. And if we're being honest, it's just bad editing. But, it is what it is. But funny note, Danielle Harris actually kept the fake leg that was used in the scene and keeps it in storage. So, at least she got something out of it. So, what do you think about all that, Mike?
I think that's pretty cool, but I have to comment on something. You slipped in a little Sly Randy reference there with the Showgirls horror reference, and I like it. So I actually always wondered why Jamie's leg is bleeding when she climbs out of that chute. In the theatrical cut, they make it look like all of Michael's stabbings were below her feet and not even getting her. Yep. I'm actually shocked, however, that getting stabbed in the leg was such a huge deal to the MPAA. The only thing I can think of is because she's a child, like you mentioned, but in my head, it was not like they were plunging a knife into her chest. An unaimed cut to the leg doesn't seem too extreme to show, even with her being a child. I mean, it would be different, I guess, if it was like Michael over her, like stabbing her. You can see her face and the whole thing and stuff. It would be different in that case. So while I disagree, I can see that might be that might be too intense. But that isn't what was happening there.
Yeah, and don't you want to see it now to decide for yourself?
I do. I want to see it now.
Absolutely.
But we have reached the end of our production conversation. Now we need to talk about post-production. Despite the subtitle, The Revenge of Michael Myers, which is on all the movie posters and covers, it does not appear in the actual film. It just says Halloween 5. And in an odd coincidence, the fifth film of all three of the major slasher series, with Michael, Freddy, and Jason, all have a different title in the film than the one that is shown on the cover. In Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, Part 5 is missing. And in A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 5, The Dream Child, the number 5 is missing.
Yeah, evidently, in horror movies, 1 isn't the lowest number, it's 5. You don't get to have a subtitle. You must stand alone. You don't get to go past go. You don't collect your $200. You don't go to jail. You're just alone. And if you are the fifth entrance in the franchise, poor movies, we weep for them. We'll give you some Evil Pie later, Dream Child and A New Beginning. You get Evil Pie as well. So, oh man, that is really weird. That is a weird coincidence. It makes you wonder about, karma or what's going on in the world. But enough of the weeping for the film. So, because there's no crying in horror and there's no crying among horror fans. So, yeah, as we mentioned before, the film was facing an X rating for all the violence and gore, even though we really don't know what all that violence and gore was. are we giving the MPA the benefit of the doubt, or are we telling them we want to see it? I think we're telling them we want to see it.
I think we're telling them that they suck ass and we want to see it.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So you robbed us of our stuff, resulting in a lot of scenes being trimmed down. So screw you, MPAA. You get no evil pie. That's it.
Right.
So, the missing trims, though, were eventually found and included on the 2021 4K Blu-ray by Shout Factory. So I'm going to have to pick that up because I want to see it. Yeah. The film had been fighting an X-ray with its graphic depictions of violence, blood, and gore. Some of the scenes were trimmed down to keep the film's R rating. One of those scenes is a scene where Mike is quivering on the ground after Michael stabs him in the head with a hand rake. Additionally, the MPAA forced the cut of scenes where glass is embedded in Officer Eddie's face after Michael punches through the windshield. See, I want all this stuff. I want it all, man. I want all the gore. So... yeah. Billy's leg being hit by the Camaro, and a scene where the scythe kills Samantha as originally planned. So those were allowed to stand, but those other ones were cut. So I just don't understand what they cut and what they don't cut. You know, it's like, give us the film. I guess this is why director's cuts are a thing, you know?
You know, what weirds me out about it is with most horror movies, the thing they're trying to avoid is the NC-17 ratings, because that means, whereas like with an R rating, you can be under 18 and still go in there if you have your parents' permission. But with an NC-17 rating, you have to be 17 to go in there. And that's usually what most horror movies are trying to avoid. I think them going to an X rating seems ultra extreme there. So I'm actually of the opinion that the MPAA has a giant no fun at all stick up their ass.
Exactly.
Halloween 5 would have been a better film with the shots and scenes you mentioned there. There was a bit more taking out during the editing process as well. In the original closing scene, after Jamie finds that Michael has escaped from the police station, she is approached by the black cloak figure. At the time of filming, it was unknown who this figure was. It would only be expanded on and explained in the subsequent film Halloween 5, The Curse of Michael Myers from 1995. And the scene in question was attached to the beginning of the producer's cut of that film in the flashback. Though the cuts made to the beginning and ending of the film largely diminish this subplot, the Man in Black character still appears momentarily on several occasions in the film, which led to some confusion among audiences upon its original release. I was pretty confused about the Man in Black. I did not understand what his deal was at all, beyond having the same mark of thorn on his right wrist that Michael Myers did. So what can you tell us about the music of the film, Nem? I know that's one of your favorite parts of the filmmaking process.
Yeah, absolutely. I love music, talk about music, and luckily Othar and Gerard didn't have anything to do with the music of this film. So it turned out pretty well, you know, because, you know, music can make or break a movie, you know, or the lack of music can make or break a movie. Sometimes there are some films with no music at all that really help, you know, and I'd venture to say that no movie is complete without a soundtrack or lack thereof. And this one is certainly no exception. There are great films who build story with silence, but Halloween has always leaned on its music. And in this film, Alan Howarth returned to compose the film, and he does a stellar job, expounding on the original themes written by John Carpenter for the first movie. You know, and John Carpenter is always good at doing that. You know, grew up as in a musical family and doing music as well. So similar to the previous movies in the Halloween franchise, this soundtrack also contains tracks, you know, actual tracks by independent or other music acts and things in the film as well. So those tracks here include such acts as White Sister and Rhythm Tribe. There are also quite a few unknown bands and solo artists on the soundtrack that include Becca, DV8, Eileen Clark, Diggy, and Mark Chosak. And the soundtrack was released to compact disc. Wow, that is old. LP, vinyl record, oh man, and cassette tape on September 11th, 1989. So what do you feel about the use of music in movies, and this movie in particular, Mike?
There is no denying the powerful effect music has on a movie. The music tells us how to feel and how the characters feel. Images and words alone cannot convey the emotion of a scene or the atmosphere of the film. But if I could switch gears a bit, I would like to talk about how the Halloween franchise is inconsistent from film to film. We've touched on this a bit, but I'd like to bring it up a little bit more here.
Sure.
Footage was added to the beginning of the movie from the previous unused footage from the ending of Halloween 4 to show that Michael had actually fallen down a nearby mine shaft rather than just being swallowed by the ground. But that wasn't all. There was no nearby river that I am aware of in Halloween 4, and the mob didn't drop dynamite down the hole in part 4 either.
Yeah, well, being swallowed up by the ground is pretty final. And we all know that mud and gravity are two things to always be aware of. Little Fellowship of the D20 humor, folks. Go check that out if you want to know about how mud and gravity and water and other things are actually deadly foes. But anyway, I digress. I honestly don't mind this kind of stuff, but I'm one of those people that will give a pass on this just because I want to enjoy the movie. But you do have to give yourself somewhere to go unless you go with the inevitable time jump or you tell the audience, just shut up, enjoy the movie where we take you. So I do find it odd, though, that a mine shaft has a convenient mini tunnel that just so happens to lead to a river, which in turn leads to a dude who's going to take care of a bloody man wearing a strange mask. Maybe it's just me, but that seems like a little coincidence there. Go figure,
That is all rather convenient, isn't it?
It's like it was planned out.
Right? It seems like it. He had an escape plan all along. We thought he was just trying to get her, but no. But speaking of that old man from the opening scene, he was originally scripted as a younger man named Dr. Death, which is a much cooler man than the Hermit. But he actually, this Dr. Death character actually had a fascination with the occult. His shack was supposed to be filled with ancient runes and tablets, and he attempted to bring Michael back to life after finding him. This scene was filmed and can be seen on Inside Halloween 5 from 2000. I just have to say that I was homeless from 16 until almost 19, and there are no places to build a shack for you and your pet parrot just hanging around town. So I have to say that I'm having a hard time with this one, with him just building a shack there, and it always kind of bugs me. Jason Voorhees had a shack, but it was in the woods. That is believable, but I'm just not seeing that within the confines of a city.
Well, I do have to say, I guess it depends on the city, but I agree with you in theory. The larger the city, the more likely you are to encounter weird shit like this, though. I mean, the area I grew up in is a mix of urban, suburban, and farmland, and is home to about 2 million people east of LA. And I'll tell you, I've seen it all out here. I was driving once, and a completely naked guy knocked on my car door in the middle of a cemetery at midnight. And I also once found a black mass altar in the middle of a deserted orange grove. And yes, abandoned cabins and homes that people squat in the middle of nowhere. So, oh shit. Now I'm worried some guy with a strange mask going to show up at my door.
As you should be by the sound of it. I guess I stand corrected on that one. So I talked before in previous episodes how much the Halloween franchise and Friday the 13th feed off each other. Well, the Jamie Lloyd character has striking resemblance to the Tommy Jarvis character from Friday the 13th comparatively. Consider this. Both characters appear in the 4th, 5th, and 6th films of the franchise. They were both about the same age in their first appearance. They both become institutionalized and develop homicidal tendencies themselves after the killer who traumatized them. In Halloween 5, Jamie starts out as a mute. In Friday the 13th, Part 5, Tommy barely speaks. At the end of that film, Tommy is seen holding a knife and appears to become the new Jason. At the end of Halloween 4, Jason is seen holding a pair of scissors and a clown costume, appearing to have become the new Michael. But she was not the only one to have something in common with Tommy Jarvis in Halloween 5. I can't help but notice that Loomis is bashing away at Michael with the 2x4 and yelling, die, 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 over and over again, just like Tommy Jarvis was doing to Jason at the end of Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter. And here's another thing, but this time I think it's Friday the 13th ripping off Halloween. You know how there is a man in black in Halloween 4, 5, and 6? A man dressed like a city cowboy all in all black? Well, I'm immediately reminded long black trench coat, black hat and boots bounty hunter from Jason Goes to Hell named Crichton Duke.
All right. I'm going to have to make a little admission here. Don't everyone hate me out there, but I've only ever seen 2 Friday the 13th movies, if you believe it or not. Yeah. I'm much more into demon and paranormal movies, creature flicks, and Nightmare on Elm Street, you know? So I did watch Freddy versus Jason, though. I love that movie. So I am looking forward to watching the Friday the 13th films for the show. So please, am I allowed still to eat evil pie? Because I will watch the Friday the 13th movies. I just haven't enjoyed all of them yet. So
I look forward to doing some of those demon paranormal creature flicks with you. Also, knowing you're a Nightmare on Elm Street fan, I look forward to doing those with you as well. I think actually having different tastes will broaden the perspectives we can bring to the show. So while you get a demerit for not having watched Friday the 13th, I won't revoke your horror fan license.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. That is a fair comment.
Totally kidding. But seriously, Dr. Loomis poses an interesting thought about why Michael Myers comes back after wounds that should have killed him by saying hell would not have him. By that logic, it seems like he's saying that maybe Michael does die, but hell spits him back out. But considering we're dead smack in the middle of the Thorn Trilogy, I'm going to say the Curse of Thorn brings him back until his job of killing his family is over, like me and James talked about in episode 4. But essentially, the Curse of Thorn is placed on a child by a leader of the Thorn cult. It commands that child to kill his entire family as a blood sacrifice to keep the cult alive. It also makes that child able to withstand serious injuries that would result in death for any normal human being. And it turns the child into pure evil. All of that to say that hell was not spitting Michael back out, but rather the Curse of Thorn was reanimating him until the job was done. You'll note that he didn't move at all for 10 years until someone mentioned the name of Jamie Lloyd and said that she was Laurie Strode's daughter. And the curse knew that Michael had not finished his task. But it's more than that. It's about when the constellation of Thorn appears in the sky on Samhain that Michael returns. That's why we see him motionless in that hermit shack for a year until the Thorn constellation appears during Samhain the next year. Also, you have to wonder about whether Michael thought he had passed on the Curse of Thorn to Jamie, but I don't know.
See, now you've given me another great idea. They should have done a movie or at least a flashback scene that gives us more detail about the Curse of Thorn. If this is going to be such an integral part of the movie, really play up the supernatural aspects of this whole thing, it might have worked. If I'm being honest, though, I don't think the whole hell spatted back out thing really applies here. And I like what they did with Halloween, released in 2018. Go back to the source material and be upfront with the fact that Michael Myers is one gigantic, tough, scary, evil, son of a bitch, serial killer motherfucker. Enough said.
I love Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills, so I am with you on that one. Actually, you'll be happy to know that they did, in fact, make a movie that elaborated on the Curse of Thorn. And what's more, we're covering it next month. It's Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers.
Sweet.
Of course, there are 2 versions of the film. The producer's cut that actually covers the whole Curse of Thorn thing, and the theatrical cut that downplays the whole thing. But we'll get into all of that next month. So, Michael starts doing something in Halloween 5 that he did not do before, and that is walk around with the knife held up like Jamie did at the end of Halloween 4, when she was standing there at the top of the stairs. I can only infer that while Jamie clearly has a psychic link with Michael in 5, perhaps some of Jamie was passed on to him. Maybe that was even the reason why he stopped and took his mask off, and hell, even shed a tear for a minute in the attic.
I love you, Mike, but I think you're being very generous here. But okay, sure. If that's the case, they took the writing adage of show don't tell to a huge extreme. I mean, you got to give me something to put those dots together. But yeah, it's plausible, man. It's certainly plausible. So
I'll be honest. I am being extremely generous, and I am fully reaching for fucking straws with that. But yeah. I am desperately trying to come up with a reason that scene didn't suck.
that was some LeBron James reaching right there, man.
Yeah, it would seem that I failed, though, unlike the good good LeBron James. So let me talk about another observation I had from the film. Loomis is a straight dick in Halloween 5. He pushes
he is.
Yeah. He pushes Jamie way too hard without any concern for her whatsoever. He even deliberately makes things up to scare her into doing what he wants. Listen to what he told her as she cried and turned away from him. You've got to help me, Jamie. You've got to help me find him. We both know he's alive, but you know where he is. Why? Why are you protecting him? What about your stepmother, Jamie? You love her, don't you? He made you stab her. You can't hide from him. He'll always get you, Jamie. Jamie, listen. Today in the cemetery, somebody dug up a coffin. It was a coffin of a 9-year-old girl. What do you think he's going to do with that, Jamie? You're 9 years old, aren't you, Jamie? I mean, God damn. He is full on going to traumatize Jamie for his own ends, and he physically shakes her around and even throws a table off to the side. Then he clearly says something that references Halloween 6, the curse of Michael Myers, and the curse of Thorn when he asks, there's a reason why he has this power over you. Did you ever wonder what that is? He even uses her as bait, callously, without even telling her what was going on. Loomis was basically Captain Ahab at that point, and nothing mattered to him but capturing Michael. And I say capturing because you'll notice that he used a tranquilizer gun and not a real one. My only guess is that Smith Groves was able to keep Michael sedated, mostly on meds. So perhaps maybe Loomis thought that sedation might be the way to go, but it's not really clear. All that is clear is that by this movie, Loomis didn't care about anybody or anything but his obsession. I can't help but think of what Dr. Hoffman said to Loomis in Halloween 4 when he said that Loomis was the one that was in need of mental help, not Michael Myers. I think that sometime during the 11 years between Halloween 2 and Halloween 4, the constant stress and wonder if Michael could kill again at any moment eventually caused Loomis to just have a nervous breakdown, and maybe he never recovered from that. What do you think about that theory, Nem?
I got to say, I think you're right on the money with this one, Mike. In fact, I go so far as to say that Loomis has the record for being Michael's longest suffering victim throughout all of the films he appears in. I mean, the very first time we meet Loomis, he is already convinced that Michael is uniquely dangerous and should never get out. I mean, that man is freaked out by Michael before any of this even happened, all this other stuff, you know? And then you look at Loomis in this film. I mean, this man has been through the ringer. He's been slashed, burned, tossed mentally and physically and emotionally abused until he is scared shitless. All of this, and he is also carrying around survivor's guilt on top of everything else because he at least feels partially responsible for the continued evil and mayhem Michael has wrought. I mean, Loomis is certainly a dick. I'll give you that. I mean, there's no arguing with that, but I'm inclined to give him a pass, at least a little one, even if I don't condone his behavior. I mean, evidently, Donald Pleasance was very vocal about his dissatisfaction, though, with the way director Dominique Otherin-Girard, there's that name again, had him play Dr. Loomis. You know, I will say to Donald Pleasance, no offense to the great man, may he rest in peace, but I do have to kind of go with the director here, even though it is very hard to watch Loomis being this much of a dick. I think there was a way to play a more sympathetic Loomis in this movie, but if I'm being honest, I find this version of Loomis very believable, given everything he's gone through. So,
I would just like to point out the monumental nature of giving Dominique Othenin-Girard any play at all here. you giving him a pass there, even a little bit, or agreeing with him. That's considering how much we've come to hate him in this episode. That's saying something pretty big, I think.
Wait a minute, hold on. You're putting words in my mouth. I'm not giving Othenin-Girard a pass. I'm giving Loomis a pass. So,
okay.
I understand Loomis where he's at. I'm in his head. I'm not seeing eye to eye with him, but I understand. You know, Othenin-Girard can go. Well, I'm not going to say that, but you know, we're not a fan. So
I could certainly see how Loomis got there, and I understand the road that he took too. Even if I cannot condone his behavior like you, I think the thing that threw me about it was that he was not that way just a year before. But that he got there is believable for sure. But now we have actually reached my favorite part of the show, when despite our countless corpses name, we are definitely going to count the corpses. Now, the first death was the hermit living in the shack that took care of Michael Myers for a year while he got better. I can't tell by the footage in the movie what exactly happens during his death, though. Michael appears to pick him up and slam him down. There's definitely a downward attack onto the old hermit, but I can't see any knives or weapons. So either we're to assume that the old hermit died by blunt force, or according to HalloweenMovieFandom.com, he was stabbed in the back. So what do you think, Nem? How are we going to say he died? What was your take on it?
Well, far be it from me to disagree with the fandom, but I'm going to say that I thought that Michael just beat that poor old dude to death by slamming his head down and killing him through blunt force trauma. Let's face it, Michael doesn't need a knife to kill someone. And even though I saw this coming from a mile away, I hated that this poor old dude bought it. It sucked.
It looks like we both got the same impression on that one. So we are officially saying that the hermit died by blunt force trauma. Sorry, HalloweenMovieFandom.com. So this is the second Halloween movie where Michael Myers murders on October 30th, starting with the hermit, with the first being Halloween 4 when he woke up in the ambulance. You'll note that in both cases, it was right after he woke up. I mean, maybe, just maybe, Michael is just pissed that he woken up and nobody had any coffee made. I mean, I could be a bit of a Michael Myers before I wake up, you know?
Whoa. Okay, Mike, you just let me know if you need some coffee, all right, man?
Hey, they don't call me Macabre Michael Nunneley for nothing.
I guess. Hey,
but I will do, man.
Mrs. Nim, make some coffee, please.
The next death is the death of Rachel Carruthers, and she was stabbed through the chest with a pair of scissors. Although I would have been much cooler to see her stabbed in the throat with a pair of scissors, but that's just me. What do you think, Dem? Throat or chest?
Can I say eye? Yeah, something about a nice pair of scissors to the eye just does it for me. You know, it's the little things. But if that is an option, though, I have to agree with you and say throat for sure. In addition, it would have given the FX crews the ability to stretch their legs a bit. I mean, we're pushing an X-rated again here, but can you imagine if the scissors went all the way through her throat and then Michael yanks them out through the front of the throat forcefully, mostly decapitating her? That would have been grisly as all hell, but very effective visually. That would have been cool to see.
Hell yeah! I do like the idea of scissors to the eye, but I think, I mean, you know, in that particular shot where she dies, Michael's coming down at her from above like this. So I mean, I think the angle would have to be right. I mean, he would have to be coming up into the eye, like when Michael shoves his knife through Marcus's eye and into his skull, like in Halloween Kills. I'm not sure the wound to the eye is actually lethal all on its own, but it is a great idea. As far as almost decapitating Rachel with the scissors, that would have been very visually striking, and I would have loved that. I would have liked to have some kind of struggle there, some kind of attempt to fight back by Rachel, as it was kind of a surprise you're dead kind of death. Corpse number 3 is Tina's asshole boyfriend, Mike. I love that Michael scratched up his precious car and even choked him a little before stabbing him in the forehead with the gardening glove.
You secretly wanted Tina to buy it here as well, didn't you, Mike? Come on, admit it.
Yes, I did, but you know you were thinking about it too.
Yes, I was.
Corpse number 4 is actually an interesting one. You see, number 4 is Spitz, Sammy's boyfriend, the guy that got the beer from them from the store. When Spitz got the pitchfork through his back, he was actually dressed as Michael Myers. This is particularly interesting because things have not gone well for those who dressed as Michael Myers in the past. In Halloween 2, Ben Tramer was run into by a cop car. The car exploded, and as he was pinned between the cop car and another car, Ben Tramer just burned to death while the cops watched him. In Halloween 4, Ted Hollister was gunned down by the Beer Belly Truck Brigade because they thought he was Michael Myers. But Spitz is the first time in the whole series where Michael Myers actually kills the guy dressed like Michael Myers.
It's movie rules, man. Movie rules. He bought beer for the kids, and he's dressed up like the killer mocking him. I can hear Randy from Scream starting the lecture already, man. So
yes, I freaking love Randy and his horror movie survival rules. And I too can hear it now. Standing up in front of the TV, beer and everything, I can see it.
Absolutely. He's like, man, you were asking for it.
So Spit's girlfriend Sammy is actually corpse number 5. Her chest is sliced open with a scythe. I do have to give her props, though, for pulling the pitchfork out of Spit's back to fight Michael with. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it definitely was. But I have to say, I wish she had gotten a shot in, at least, but at least she didn't go out saying something stupid or bumbling around saying, like, who's there? Or something like that, some of that stuff. So once again, Randy is lecturing us. Yes, shut up, Randy. We all know the rules, man. Just get in the corner over there and hold on till Scream 2 because, we'll get to you eventually. So.
The two bumbling cops, Deputy Nick Ross and Deputy Tom Fair, are corpses number 6 and number 7. They are stabbed multiple times with a pitchfork. I'm assuming the same pitchfork that he killed Sammy and Spitz with.
Yes, and with cross-contamination, those poor guys would have died from an infection if they hadn't been stabbed multiple times as well. But now, I know you're going to be happy with our next kill, but I was ready for these two to buy it from the very first time their stupid music played. I mean, what a bunch of damn asses. I'm sorry, man, but this is not my favorite kill in the movie, but next to Tina Williams, it's my favorite character disappearing from the movie. I hated these two. So.
that music really did set the stage for those two, didn't it? With the bells and whistles and stuff in their first appearance. You just knew they were going to die, and it was not going to be pretty. Also, you are definitely right about my loving the next kill. It is my favorite in the entire movie, and not because it is the coolest death, but because I hate the woman that was killed. Of course, I'm talking about Tina Williams being corpse number 8. She took a pretty serious stab to the chest, and I admit I fucking cheered a little.
It's the little things, buddy. It's the little things. Congratulations. Mazel tov. So
you got that right. Deputy Eddie Gray was number 9. We see his death in flashes as his head is bashed against the steering wheel like 9 times.
Yeah, this was pretty damn brutal, and I really liked the way they cut the scene. In fact, this is my favorite kill in the whole movie. I love how brutal it is. I love the way they cut back and forth. Man, I just love the scene. I think it's so well done. But that said, is it just me, or was Deputy Block a complete friggin' moron during this murder? He's sitting in there listening to this dude getting mauled, and he kept asking, what's going on? What's going on the walkie-talkie? About dude is getting his face bashed in. Like, come on, man. Dude is getting killed, Charlie. Get your ass out there with your gun and save your boy. Oh, God. I was like, man, Deputy Block, you are a dumbass. You needed the music from the other 2 deputies at that point. So.
He did at that point. I think you're right on that. Actually, of all the Halloween movies, I think the cops look worse in this one. There's really no comparison, really, if you compare them to the other cops in the films. It's probably not a coincidence that more cops die in Halloween 5 than any other movie in the franchise.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Deputy Dewey wasn't on the force, so,
Right?
Yeah.
Deputy Charlie Block is number 10, and he was hung from a rope ladder out of the window. I mean, I don't know if they still do this, but they at least used to make these rope ladders for 2-story houses as a fire escape. Do you know if they still do those by any chance?
I don't think so, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, they did back in 1989, I guess. But Michael is shot at 10 times by Deputy Charlie with a Smith & Wesson Model 64. So at least he went down swinging, even if that particular gun can only fire 7 rounds with a special modification.
Details. Come on, man. Give him a pass. I mean, to his credit, Charlie is still wondering what the hell happened to Eddie Gray as he's dying. He's still trying to get on the walkie-talkie while he's being hung by his neck, So we'll give him a pass for his own gun ignoring the laws of reality. I mean, come on.
So basically, in the movie universe, if you're dumb enough, reality will bend for you.
Exactly. There you go.
But seriously, this is not the first movie to give way more bullets than a gun can hold to a gun. So a pass is given there for sure. I just had to point that out. The next kills are a little complicated, actually. There was a sequence that was filmed of Michael attacking and killing SWAT team members, Dr. Max Hart and Nurse Patsy West, at the children's clinic Jamie was in to distract the police. The final film mentioned this only in passing, but the event did happen. We can deduce that if the SWAT team members died, there was at least 2 of them. And with Dr. Hart and Nurse West, take the count up to 14. But what do you think about that, Nam? Are we counting 2 SWAT team members? And are we saying there were 2 of them?
All right, look. Did you see what happened to the guy who dressed up as Michael and dissed him? I'm not taking any kills away from that mofo. Give him all the kills, I say. So, yes, those SWAT members and the nurse, they dead. Michael gets the kills. It's all you, man. Don't come for me. Come for Randy or whoever else. Deputy Eddie Gray, Eddie Block, Charlie Block, those guys.
All right. So we are officially at 14 corpses then, folks. The next 8 corpses, including Sheriff Ben Meeker, Deputy Tony, and 6 other unnamed and unknown officers, were all mowed down with a machine gun by the mysterious man in black that we won't find out the identity of until Halloween 5, or even that it was him that did it. But there was a couple more deaths too. Michael also killed the opossum, Max the dog, and we can't forget about the hermit's parrot. The lists of deaths wiki say that Michael actually killed the parrot off screen.
Jesus, he killed the parrot too? Damn, Michael, drink your coffee, man. Let's see here. So with the parrot, man, that just makes me sad. God, killed the goddamn parrot. Holy crap. Well, that brings the final corpse count to 25. Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. So I really do have to say, I was most upset when I saw that Max the dog had bought it. But the parrot is getting to me now. I really don't know what to do with myself. I don't know what that says about me, but there you go. You know, I'm sitting here cheering for the deaths of the people, but I'm upset with the deaths of the animals. We talked about the little well blower with serial killers, but you know, don't worry about it. I'm your friend. So
I am most often more greatly disturbed when things happen to dogs in movies. I really don't like it. I'm a huge dog lover. So I totally get where you're coming from. So whatever that says about you, it says about me too, my friend. As for my final thoughts on the film, I have to say that H5 has grown on me. For first several viewings, I could not see past my irritation with Tina or the Myers house. That was in no way the Myers house. But I really like the film now, despite its problem. I would definitely include it in a Halloween marathon. Is it my favorite among the franchise? No. But it's not one I would skip over entirely, like, say, Halloween Resurrection and Halloween Ends. But how about you, Nem? Do you have any final thoughts on the film before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some very good things. It's some very annoying things about this film. I think the suspense, kills, and the potential of the story are very good, bordering on fantastic at times. Conversely, some of the acting, story holes, and little mistakes really take away from the film, though not my enjoyment of it. You know, but those little mistakes can add up. They pile up. You know, so if you put me in my jammies at night, you put some popcorn in my hand and a full moon in the sky, this is a very watchable film, though. You know, I would definitely check this out. So it would be my first choice, but it's not the worst movie I've ever seen by a long shot. So I'd give it a solid C+ installment for this franchise, or C+ installment in this franchise in my book.
I actually hadn't thought about giving the film a rating. You might have just come up with something new for the show there. But I think I can agree with like a C+ to like a B- range. So we're pretty close on that one. But that about wraps up another episode of the Countless Corpses podcast, and the first episode with my new co-host, Nam. We have had fun making this episode, and we hope that you've had fun either listening to it or watching it. But before we go, let me leave you with the words of Clive Barker from Books of Blood. Everybody is a book of blood.